The night before my wedding, my sister hugged me and said, "I'm so happy for you." The next morning, my fiancé called me and said the wedding is off. I stood there in my wedding dress, holding my phone, completely frozen. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat down and thought, something is very wrong here. 6 months later, when I finally found out what my sister did, I didn't get angry. I smiled. Because by that time, I had already prepared everything. My name is Rachel. I'm 28 years old, and until 18 months ago, I genuinely believed I had the perfect life. I had a stable job as a marketing manager at a mid-sized firm. I had my own apartment, small, but mine. I had friends who actually showed up when I needed them. And most importantly, I had Daniel. Daniel came into my life 3 years before all of this happened. We met at a mutual friend's dinner party. He was quiet at first, the kind of quiet that makes you curious, not uncomfortable. He listened when people talked. He remembered small details. On our third date, he brought me chamomile tea because I had mentioned once, casually, that coffee gave me anxiety. That was the moment I knew. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. It wasn't some grand public gesture, no restaurant flash mob, no jumbotron. He proposed in our kitchen on a Sunday morning while I was making eggs. He just walked up behind me, put a ring on the counter next to the stove, and said, "I've been carrying this for 3 weeks waiting for the perfect moment, but I realized every moment with you is already perfect." I said yes before he even finished the sentence. Our wedding was planned for the following spring. 14 months of planning. Every detail was intentional. Blush roses and white peonies. A small venue, only 80 guests. A live acoustic guitarist for the ceremony. My dress had taken 4 fittings to get right. I had been the happiest I had ever been in my adult life. And standing right beside me through all of it, or so I thought, was my sister, Claire. Claire is 3 years older than me. Growing up, we were close in the way siblings are when they're the only company each other has. Our parents worked long hours. We shared a room until I was 15. We had our fights, sure, but I always considered her my person. When Daniel proposed, Claire was the first person I called. She screamed into the phone. She cried. She said, "Finally, he's perfect for you." She was my maid of honor. I trusted her completely. That was my first mistake. The week before the wedding was chaotic in the best possible way. Final venue confirmation. Catering tasting. Rehearsal dinner planning. I was running on 4 hours of sleep and pure adrenaline. Daniel and I had decided to follow tradition. We weren't staying together the night before the wedding. He was at his brother's place. I was at my apartment with Claire and 2 of my closest friends, Maya and Priya. That week, Claire was around constantly. She said she wanted to help with last-minute details. She drove me to the final dress fitting. She helped me address the last few invitation cards that had been delayed. She was everywhere. I noticed, looking back, that she asked a lot of questions about Daniel that week. About his family. About his finances. About whether he had ever been in serious relationships before me. At the time, I thought nothing of it. I assumed she was just being protective, doing that older sister thing where she suddenly gets serious right before a big life event. I didn't think to question it. On Thursday, 2 days before the wedding, Claire asked me something strange. We were sitting at my kitchen table going through the seating chart when she looked up and said, "Rachel, are you sure Daniel is who you think he is?" I laughed. I actually laughed. What does that mean? I asked. She shrugged. I just want to make sure you're not rushing into something. Claire, we've been together for 3 years, I said. I'm not rushing anything. She nodded slowly and went back to the seating chart. I forgot about it almost immediately. There was too much to do. That was Thursday. By Saturday morning, my entire life had collapsed. Saturday. Wedding day. I woke up at 6 a.m. I lay in bed for a few minutes just breathing, trying to take in the fact that today was the day. Maya and Priya were already awake. I could smell coffee from the kitchen. Claire was still asleep in the guest room. By 7 a.m., the hair stylist had arrived. By 8 a.m., I was already in the chair, watching my reflection transform into someone who looked like she belonged in a wedding magazine. My phone buzzed at 9:17 a.m. Daniel. I picked up smiling. He didn't say hello. He said, "Rachel, I can't do this." Everything stopped. The hairstylist stopped. The music Maya had been playing in the background seemed to fade. I felt the air leave the room. "What?" I said. My voice came out completely flat. Like I was reading a word off a page. "I'm sorry," he said. I know the timing is." He stopped. He sounded like he was struggling to breathe. "I found out something last night. I need time. I can't explain right now. I'm so sorry, Rachel." The call ended. I sat there with my hair half done, holding my phone, in complete silence. Maya came in first. She took one look at my face and said, "Rachel, what happened?" I couldn't answer. Claire appeared in the doorway behind her. She looked at me with wide eyes and said, "Oh my God, what's wrong?" And I remember, even in that moment, something felt slightly off about the way she said it. Not wrong enough to register fully. Just a half-second delay. A fraction too much surprise in her voice. But I was too destroyed to process it. I called Daniel back 4 times. No answer. I called his brother. He said Daniel had left early that morning and wasn't answering his calls either. By 11 a.m., we had to make calls. Cancel the venue. Contact the caterer. Reach out to guests. I did all of it in my wedding dress because I didn't have the energy to take it off. Claire sat beside me the entire time, rubbing my back, handing me tissues. "Whatever he found out, it's a misunderstanding," she kept saying. "He'll come around." He didn't come around that day. He didn't come around that week. For 6 weeks, Daniel and I had almost no contact. He sent one text message 3 days after the wedding was supposed to happen. It said, "I'm sorry for the way this happened. I need space to think. Please don't contact me for a while." I respected it. I didn't understand it. But I respected it. I went to work. I came home. I stared at the ceiling. I lost 8 pounds without trying. My friends checked on me constantly. My parents were devastated and furious at Daniel, furious at the situation. Claire called me every single day. She was the most supportive person in my life during those 6 weeks. She brought me food. She watched movies with me when I couldn't sleep. She kept saying, "He doesn't deserve you. You're going to be okay. You're going to be better than okay." I held on to her words like a lifeline. I had no idea those words were coming from the person who had burned my life down. 8 weeks after the cancelled wedding, Daniel called. I almost didn't pick up. I did. He asked if he could see me. In person. To explain. We met at a coffee shop near my apartment. He looked tired. Like he hadn't slept properly in 2 months, which, I would later find out, he hadn't. He sat down across from me and said, "I owe you the full truth and I'm ashamed it took me this long to give it to you." He told me that the night before our wedding, Friday night, while he was at his brother's place, he received a series of messages from an unknown number. The messages contained screenshots. Conversations. Fake ones, but constructed carefully enough that at 11 p.m. the night before his wedding, with his emotions already running high, they looked real. The screenshots showed what appeared to be messages between me and an ex-boyfriend. Not just friendly messages. Messages that implied I had been seeing him throughout our relationship. Messages where I supposedly said I was only marrying Daniel for financial security. Messages where I said I didn't actually love him. There was even a fake photo. Me and someone else, taken from my actual Instagram and edited with another person added into the frame so naturally that you wouldn't catch it unless you were really looking. Daniel said he stared at his phone for 3 hours that night. He tried to convince himself it was fake. But the doubt crept in. And by 3 a.m., he had convinced himself that everything he thought we had was a lie. He made the call at 9 a.m. He said he knew within 2 days that something was wrong with the screenshots, the metadata didn't match, the font in one conversation was slightly different from a real iPhone message thread. He hired someone to analyze them digitally. They were completely fabricated. By that point, he had already canceled the wedding. He was too ashamed to call me immediately. He spent weeks trying to figure out who had sent those messages. And then he found out. He slid his phone across the coffee shop table. The unknown number that had sent him those messages. It traced back to a burner app. Downloaded from a device registered to my sister's email address. I stared at the screen for a long time. Daniel kept talking. He had done more digging. He had spoken to people. He had found things. Claire had been in love with Daniel before I was. They had met, briefly, at a party almost 4 years ago. Before Daniel and I got together. They had spoken once or twice. Daniel had been friendly but nothing more. He didn't even remember her clearly when he and I started dating. To him, she was just my sister. To Claire, it had been something else. When Daniel and I got serious, something shifted in Claire. Mutual friends later told me she had talked about Daniel privately, about how she had seen him first, about how it wasn't fair, about how I always got everything. I always got everything. That sentence hit me somewhere deep. Because from where I was standing, Claire had always been the one our parents praised. The good grades. The stable career she'd built by 25. The confidence I spent my entire childhood wishing I had. But that's the thing about resentment, it doesn't require logic. It just requires a story you've told yourself long enough that it starts to feel like truth. Claire had watched me plan my wedding for 14 months. She had stood beside me at every step. She had hugged me, helped me, smiled at me. And then, the night before my wedding, she had destroyed it. I drove home from that coffee shop completely calm. Not the numb calm of shock. A different kind of calm. The kind that comes when everything suddenly makes sense and you realize you have a choice to make. I could confront Claire immediately. Scream at her. Show up at her door. Demand answers. Or I could be patient. I chose patience. First, I called Daniel. I told him I believed him completely. I told him I needed a few weeks. He understood. Then I started quietly collecting. I reached out to the mutual friends who had mentioned Claire's comments about Daniel. I asked them, carefully, to write down what they remembered, specific words, specific dates, specific conversations. Most of them didn't know the full story yet. I didn't tell them. I just asked them to help me remember. I contacted the digital analyst Daniel had used and asked for a formal written report on the fabricated screenshots, confirming their origin, the device, the email address. I spoke to a lawyer. Quietly. About defamation. About intentional interference. About documentation. And the entire time, for 4 weeks while I did all of this, I continued answering Claire's daily phone calls. "How are you feeling today?" "A little better," I'd say. "Thank you for checking on me." "He didn't deserve you," she'd say. "You're probably right," I'd say. She had no idea. Our parents have a tradition. Every year on the last Sunday of the month, we have a family dinner. Both sides, parents, aunts, uncles, cousins. It's been happening since I was a child. I chose that Sunday. I arrived early. I helped set the table. I hugged everyone. I was warm and present and completely normal. Claire arrived 20 minutes later. She hugged me at the door. "You look good," she said. "You're doing so well." "I really am," I said. And I smiled at her. We sat down to dinner. Midway through the meal, my mother asked how I was processing everything. I said, "Actually, I have some updates I'd like to share with everyone." The table quieted. I started with the story, calmly, clearly, without raising my voice once. I explained that Daniel had received fabricated messages the night before our wedding. I explained what those messages contained. I explained what the digital analysis had found. And then I put a printed copy of the analyst's report in the center of the table. I put the written statements from mutual friends beside it. I put a single screenshot of the burner app registration, the email address, at the top of the pile. Everyone at the table could read it. The email address had Claire's name in it. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard. Claire's face went through 5 different expressions in 4 seconds. Confusion. Then recognition. Then the beginning of a denial she never got to finish. Because my uncle, who is a retired attorney, picked up the analyst's report and started reading it quietly. And my father looked at Claire and said, simply, "Is this true?" She broke down immediately. She didn't deny it. She cried. She said she didn't think it would go this far. She said she was sorry. She said she didn't know what she had been thinking. I watched her. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. When she finished, I said, "I forgive you. But I want you to know that Daniel and I are back together. We're going to reschedule the wedding. And you will not be invited." I picked up my evidence, put it back in the folder, and asked my mother to pass the bread. Daniel and I rescheduled our wedding for 8 months later. It was smaller than the original, only 40 guests. No drama. No elaborate planning. Just the people who had actually shown up for us. My friend Maya was my maid of honor. It was the best day of my life. Claire sent a letter 2 months after that family dinner. It was 4 pages long. I read it once. I put it away. I haven't responded. My parents have maintained a relationship with both of us, separately. That's their choice and I respect it. Claire and I have spoken twice in the past year. Both times were brief and polite and completely hollow. I don't hate her. Hate requires ongoing energy that I've decided to spend elsewhere. But I also know something now that I didn't know before all of this happened. The people who smile at you the most, who show up the most, who call the most, who seem to care the most, are not always the people who want good things for you. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they're just watching closely. The difference is something you can't always see until you're standing in a wedding dress holding a phone with a cancelled marriage on the other end of it. But when you finally see it, you'll know exactly what to do. And that's exactly what I did.